Jury, my understanding is you have reached a verdict. All right, do you have the verdict form? All right, we pass that to the bailiff. The verdict form appears to be in order. I'll have the clerk publish the verdict.
In the Circuit Court of the 20th Judicial Circuit in Fort Lee County, Florida, criminal action. State of Florida versus Wade Wilson. Case number 19 CF 0568. Verdict. We, the jury, finds as follow as to the defendant in this case. Count 1, first-degree murder, Kristine Melton. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Count 2, grand theft motor vehicle. The defendant is guilty of grand theft motor vehicle. Count 3, battery. The defendant is guilty of battery. Count 4, first-degree murder, Diane Ruiz. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Count 5, burglary of dwelling. The defendant is guilty of burglary of a dwelling. Count 6, first-degree petty theft. The defendant is guilty of first-degree petty theft. Dated 6/12/24, so say we all, four-person.
October 7th, 2019, 6:45 a.m., Cape Coral, Florida. A man walks into a Whataburger restaurant and orders breakfast. He's covered in scratches. His knuckles are bruised. There's blood on his shirt. The cashier notices but says nothing. In the back of the parking lot sits a stolen Nissan Sentra. Inside that car, there's evidence of unspeakable violence. Blood, hair, the belongings of a dead woman. This man has just committed 2 brutal murders in the span of 6 hours. He strangled one woman while she slept in her own bed. He strangled another while driving, then pushed her body out of the car and ran over her corpse between 10 and 20 times until, in his own words, she looked like spaghetti. But what makes this case different, what makes it one of the most disturbing stories in recent American criminal history, isn't just the violence. It's what happened after his arrest. His mugshot went viral. Women around the world declared their love for him. Thousands sent him letters. Some sent explicit photos. They created TikTok fan accounts. They started fundraisers for his legal defense. They called themselves Wade's Wives. And the man they were obsessing over? A cold-blooded killer who strangled 2 innocent women and showed absolutely no remorse. His name is Wade Wilson. And because he shares his name with the Marvel character Deadpool, the media dubbed him the Deadpool Killer. This is his story. Welcome to Forensic Disconnect. I'm your host, and tonight we're examining one of the most bizarre intersections of true crime and social media obsession in modern history. The Wade Wilson case isn't just about murder. It's about how a killer became a celebrity. How face tattoos and a cocky courtroom demeanor turned a monster into a folk hero for some people. How the internet can twist tragedy into entertainment. How thousands of women can look at a man who committed heinous acts of violence and see not a monster, but a misunderstood bad boy worthy of their devotion. Before we begin, I need to be clear. This video contains disturbing details about violent crimes. 2 women lost their lives in horrific ways. Kristine Melton and Diane Ruiz deserve to be remembered as human beings, not footnotes in a viral story. They had families who loved them. They had dreams, hopes, futures that were stolen from them. So if you're ready to hear the truth behind the headlines, the facts behind the TikTok videos, the reality behind the romance, subscribe to Forensic Disconnect, hit that like button, and let's dive into the case that shocked Southwest Florida and exposed the darkest corners of online culture. Wade Stephen Wilson was born on May 20th, 1994, in Florida. His biological parents were teenagers when he was born. His father, Stephen Testifies, was just 17 years old, completely unprepared for fatherhood. His mother was barely older. The young couple struggled. They had no money, no stability, no support system. Within months of Wade's birth, they made the painful decision to place him up for adoption. Wade was adopted by Steve and Candace Wilson, a couple who genuinely wanted to give this baby a good life. They later changed their last name when they moved the family to Cape Coral, Florida, a quiet coastal city known for its waterways, family neighborhoods, and low crime rates. The Wilsons raised Wade in what appeared from the outside to be a stable, loving, middle-class home. They provided structure, education, extracurricular activities. By all accounts, his adoptive parents tried everything they could to give him opportunities. But from an early age, Wade showed signs of trouble. As a child, he was difficult to control. He had anger issues. He would fly into rages over minor things. He struggled to connect with other children. Teachers noticed behavioral problems. He was suspended from school multiple times for fighting, for threats, for defiance. One former classmate later recalled, Wade was the kind of kid who always seemed on the edge of something. You didn't want to push him because you never knew what he might do. Another classmate said, for some reason along the way, something fell off. It felt like the efforts of Steve and Candace weren't appreciated or taken for granted when it came to Wade. They tried so hard, but he just kept spiraling. As Wade entered his teenage years, the problems escalated. He started using drugs, marijuana at first, then harder substances. He drank heavily. He got into increasingly serious trouble. At 15, he was arrested for the first time, charged with theft. At 16, he was arrested again for trespassing and drug possession. His adoptive parents tried everything: therapy, rehab programs, tough love. Nothing seemed to work. Wade would promise to change, would seem to be doing better for a few weeks, and then he'd relapse, get arrested again, disappoint them again. By the time Wade was 18, Steve and Candace Wilson were emotionally and financially exhausted. Their son was spiraling out of control, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Wade's first truly serious brush with the law came in his early 20s. He was living in Tallahassee at the time, staying with friends, working odd jobs, using drugs daily. At a party one night, Wade met a young woman. According to her later testimony, Wade seemed charming at first. They talked, they flirted, and at some point, she agreed to go to his car with him. What happened next, she said, was a nightmare. She alleged that once they were in his SUV, Wade became violent. She said he raped her, that she fought back, that she screamed, and that Wade threatened to kill her if she told anyone. She reported the assault to police. A rape kit was completed. Evidence was collected. Wade was arrested and charged with sexual battery and kidnapping. The case went to trial. Wade took the stand in his own defense. He denied everything. He claimed the sex was consensual. He said the woman was lying, that she regretted what happened afterward, and made up the story to hurt him. The trial came down to her word against his. A 6-person jury deliberated and ultimately acquitted Wade Wilson of all charges. He walked free, but the damage to his reputation was done. People who knew him, people who had heard the woman's testimony, believed her. Multiple ex-girlfriends later came forward to say Wade had been violent with them too. One told investigators that Wade had strangled her during an argument, that he had put his hands around her throat and squeezed until she almost passed out. Another said Wade had hit her, beaten her, and threatened to kill her if she left him. The pattern was clear. Wade Wilson was dangerous, especially to women. Despite his troubled past, Wade managed to maintain a somewhat normal life on the surface. He had relationships, though they rarely lasted long once his violent tendencies emerged. He worked odd jobs, construction, landscaping, bar security. He lived in Cape Coral, bouncing between friends' couches, short-term rentals, and occasionally his parents' home when they'd let him stay. But beneath the surface, Wade was spiraling deeper into addiction and violence. Those close to him described him as unpredictable, prone to sudden rages, violent when drunk or high, which was almost all the time. By 2019, Wade Wilson was using methamphetamine heavily. He was staying with a friend named Jason Shepard. He had no steady job. He spent his days sleeping, his nights getting high and going to bars. And on the night of October 6, 2019, Wade went out to a bar in nearby Fort Myers called Buddha Live. It was there, in that crowded bar on a Sunday night, that Wade Wilson met Kristine Melton. Kristine Melton was 35 years old. She had grown up in Illinois, the kind of small-town girl who dreamed of something bigger. In her 20s, she moved to Florida with a close friend, hoping for a fresh start, warmer weather, new opportunities. She settled in Cape Coral and found work as a waitress and bartender. She was good at it. People liked her. She had a quick wit, a bright smile, and a genuine kindness that made customers remember her. Kristine was close with her family back in Illinois, especially her cousin Samantha Katimer. Kristine was godmother to Samantha's child, a role she took seriously. She sent birthday cards, Christmas presents, called regularly to check in. Kristine lived in a duplex in Cape Coral with her cat. She loved Halloween more than any other holiday. She would spend weeks planning her costume, decorating her apartment, handing out candy to neighborhood kids. Friends described her as fun-loving, loyal, someone who would drop everything to help if you needed her. On the night of October 6, 2019, Kristine was at Buddha Live with her friend Stephanie Sailors. It was a Sunday night, the bar was busy, and the two women were having a good time. They were drinking, dancing, meeting people. Kristine was in a good mood. She'd just gotten her work schedule for the week. She was planning a trip back to Illinois to see family. Life was good. And at some point that night, probably around midnight, Kristine met Wade Wilson. According to witnesses and later surveillance footage, Wade was charming that night. He talked to Kristine and Stephanie. He bought them drinks. He made them laugh. He seemed fun, easygoing, safe, just another guy out for a good time. Kristine had no reason to be afraid of him. Neither did Stephanie. After the bar closed around 2 a.m., Wade, Kristine, and Stephanie left together. They went to the home of Jason Shepard, the friend Wade was staying with. Jason's house was a small rental in Fort Myers, the kind of place where people came and went at all hours. They hung out there for several hours, drinking more, talking, listening to music. Security footage from a neighbor's camera shows the group arriving at Jason's house around 2:30 a.m. They stayed until approximately 5 a.m. Then, according to Stephanie's later testimony, the group decided to leave. Wade, Kristine, and Stephanie drove to Kristine's duplex in Cape Coral. Stephanie later told police that she left shortly after arriving, probably around 5:15 or 5:20 a.m. She said Kristine seemed fine, happy even, maybe a little drunk, but nothing alarming. She said Wade seemed calm. She had no idea what was about to happen. None of them did. After Stephanie left, Wade Wilson and Kristine Melton were alone in her duplex. Kristine was tired. It had been a long night. She got ready for bed, changed into comfortable clothes, probably checked her phone one last time. Then she lay down in her own bed, in her own home, a place where she should have been safe, and she fell asleep. What happened next is one of the most disturbing aspects of this case. At some point between 5:30 and 6 a.m., while Kristine Melton was asleep, Wade Wilson strangled her to death. Prosecutors believe it was premeditated, that Wade had decided at some point during the night that he was going to kill her. There was no struggle, no evidence that Kristine woke up or fought back. The medical examiner later testified that the strangulation was done from behind, that Wade likely approached her while she was lying on her side, asleep, completely defenseless. He put his hands, or possibly a ligature, around her neck and choked the life out of her. It would have taken several minutes. Kristine may have woken up at some point, may have realized what was happening, may have tried to fight, but she never had a chance. After murdering Kristine Melton, Wade Wilson didn't panic. He didn't call for help. He didn't show any remorse. Instead, he calmly went through her apartment and stole her belongings. He took her car keys, he took her purse, he took her cell phone. He took anything of value he could find. Then he walked out to her car, a 2016 Nissan Sentra, got in, and drove away. He left Kristine's body lying in her bed. He left her cat, confused and frightened, pacing the apartment. He left her life, her home, everything she'd built, and he simply moved on to his next victim. It was now approximately 6:15 a.m. on October 7th, 2019. Wade Wilson was driving around Cape Coral in Kristine Melton's stolen car. He was high on methamphetamine. The drug was flooding his system, making him feel invincible, paranoid, reckless. He was driving aimlessly, with no destination, no plan. He had just committed murder, and instead of feeling fear or guilt, he later told his father that he felt excited, powerful, like he was finally in control. And then, somewhere along El Dorado Boulevard in Cape Coral, Wade Wilson saw Diane Ruiz. Diane Ruiz was 43 years old. She was a mother. She had children who loved her and needed her. She was engaged to be married to a man who adored her. Diane had struggled earlier in her life, had dealt with addiction, had made mistakes, but she had turned everything around. She was sober. She was working hard. She was building a future. Diane worked multiple jobs to support her family. She cleaned houses. She worked retail. She did whatever it took to make ends meet. And on the morning of October 7th, Diane was walking along the side of the road in Cape Coral, trying to get to one of her jobs. She didn't have a car, so she often walked or caught rides from friends. It was early, the sun was barely up, and Diane was just trying to get to work so she could earn a paycheck to support her family. Wade Wilson pulled up beside her in Kristine's stolen Nissan Sentra. What he said to her, how he convinced her to get in the car, we don't know for certain. He may have offered her a ride. He may have asked for directions. He may have seemed friendly, helpful, non-threatening, or he may have forced her into the car. We'll never know. But Diane Ruiz got into that car, and it was the last decision she ever made. According to evidence presented at trial and statements Wade later made to multiple people, once Diane was in the car, Wade immediately attacked her. He punched her in the face. He grabbed her by the throat. And while he was driving, while the car was moving down the road, Wade Wilson strangled Diane Ruiz. Diane fought for her life. She wasn't asleep like Kristine had been. She was awake, alert, terrified. She scratched at Wade's face, clawed at his arms, tried to gouge his eyes. She left deep scratches on his neck, his cheeks, his forearms. Her DNA was found under her fingernails. She fought with everything she had, but Wade was stronger. He kept one hand on the steering wheel and one hand on her throat. He choked her until she lost consciousness. And then, instead of stopping, instead of letting her go, Wade Wilson did something that still shocks investigators, prosecutors, and everyone who has heard this case. He pushed Diane's unconscious body out of the moving car onto the pavement. And then he ran over her. He backed up and ran over her again and again and again. Prosecutors believe, based on the damage to Diane's body and tire marks found at the scene, that Wade Wilson drove over Diane Ruiz's body between 10 and 20 times. He later told his father on the phone, "I ran over her until she looked like spaghetti." Let that sink in. He described a human being, a mother, a woman who was just trying to get to work, as looking like spaghetti after he repeatedly crushed her body with a car. After killing Diane Ruiz in the most brutal, depraved way imaginable, Wade Wilson drove away in Kristine Melton's stolen car. He went to a Whataburger restaurant. He ordered breakfast. He sat down and ate. Employees at the restaurant later recalled seeing a man matching Wade's description, covered in scratches, looking disheveled, but they didn't think much of it. This is Florida. People come into fast food restaurants looking rough all the time. Nobody suspected that the man eating a breakfast sandwich had just murdered 2 women in cold blood. After eating, Wade did something that would ultimately lead to his capture. He called his biological father, Stephen Testifies. Wade hadn't spoken to Stephen in years. They had virtually no relationship. Stephen had given Wade up for adoption when he was a baby and had only sporadic contact with him since. But on the morning of October 7th, 2019, Wade called his biological father, and he confessed. Stephen later testified in court about these phone calls. He said Wade called him multiple times that morning. In the first call, Wade said, "Dad, I need to tell you something. I killed someone." Stephen thought he was joking. He said, "Wade, what are you talking about? Stop messing around." But Wade insisted. "No, I'm serious. I killed 2 people. I strangled a woman while she was sleeping, and then I picked up another woman and I killed her too." Stephen still didn't believe him. He thought Wade was high, making up stories, being dramatic for attention, but Wade kept calling. He called back 5 minutes later, then 10 minutes later, then again. Each time he provided more details. He described Kristine's apartment. He described strangling her. He described picking up Diane Ruiz. He described strangling her while driving. And then he said something that made Stephen realize this wasn't a story. Wade said, "I pushed her out of the car and I ran over her. I backed up and ran over her again. I kept running over her until she didn't look human anymore." The way Wade described it, the detail, the emotion in his voice, Stephen knew it was real. Stephen Testifies put the phone on speaker so his wife could hear. And together they listened as Wade Wilson confessed to murdering 2 women. Stephen later said in court that Wade sounded excited when he was talking about the murders. He said Wade didn't sound scared or remorseful. He sounded proud. He said Wade was like he was bragging about it, like he wanted me to know what he'd done. Stephen asked Wade where he was. Wade wouldn't say. He just kept talking about the murders, describing them in horrific detail. Finally, Stephen told Wade he needed to turn himself in. Wade laughed and hung up. Stephen Testifies immediately called the police. He told them everything Wade had said. He gave them Wade's phone number, descriptions of what Wade had told him, everything he could think of. Cape Coral Police and Lee County Sheriff's Office immediately began investigating. They were able to track Kristine Melton's stolen car through its GPS system. They located the vehicle abandoned in Fort Myers later that day. Kristine's body was found in her duplex on the afternoon of October 7th. A friend had gone to check on her when she didn't show up for work and didn't answer her phone. The friend found her dead in her bed. Police were called. The scene was processed. It was clear Kristine had been murdered. Diane Ruiz was reported missing by her family on October 7th when she didn't come home from work. They knew something was wrong immediately. Diane always called. She always checked in. When she didn't, her fiancé started searching for her. He drove the route she would have walked to work. He asked people if they'd seen her. He called police and filed a missing person report. For 3 agonizing days, Diane's family searched for her. They posted flyers. They organized search parties. They prayed she was alive somewhere. Hurt, maybe, but alive. On October 10th, 2019, 3 days after Diane was murdered, her body was found. A landscaping crew working behind a Sam's Club in Cape Coral found human remains in a field. The body was so badly damaged that it took dental records to confirm it was Diane Ruiz. The medical examiner later testified that Diane had been strangled and that her body showed evidence of massive blunt force trauma consistent with being run over by a vehicle multiple times. The autopsy was one of the most difficult the examiner had ever performed because of the extent of the damage to Diane's body. Meanwhile, police were searching for Wade Wilson. They knew from Stephen Testiseca's phone call that Wade was the suspect. They had his description. They had evidence placing him with both victims. On October 8, 2019, just 1 day after the murders, police found Wade hiding in an unoccupied home in Fort Myers. He had broken in and was trying to lay low. When officers arrested him, he was still covered in scratches from Diane Ruiz's desperate fight for her life. His face, his neck, his arms, all bore the marks of her fingernails. He had blood on his clothes. He had Kristine's phone in his pocket. Wade Wilson was charged with 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder, grand theft auto, burglary of an unoccupied dwelling, battery, and petty theft. He was held without bond in the Lee County Jail. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His DNA was found in Kristine Melton's home and car. Surveillance footage placed him with both women. Witnesses had seen him with Kristine at the bar. Phone records showed him using Kristine's phone after her death. And perhaps most damning of all, he had confessed in detail to his biological father. This was an open and shut case, or so prosecutors thought. Wade Wilson was held in the Lee County Jail awaiting trial. And it was there, while locked up, that Wade began to transform himself. He started getting tattoos, lots of them, all over his face and neck. He got a Joker-style smile tattooed on his cheek. He got references to the Batman movie The Dark Knight. He got Deadpool references. He tattooed the word Slayer on his neck. He got a swastika tattooed under his right eye. He got spiderwebs, teardrops, symbols of violence and chaos. He covered himself in ink, deliberately crafting an image of menace, danger, unpredictability. Why? Some speculate Wade was trying to look intimidating for trial, trying to create sympathy by appearing mentally unstable, trying to look like someone who couldn't get a fair trial. Others think he simply enjoyed the attention, the shock value, the control it gave him over his own image. But Wade didn't stop at tattoos. In 2020, while awaiting trial, Wade Wilson and his cellmate attempted to escape from the Lee County Jail. Wade was the mastermind. They tried to remove the bars from their cell window using tools they'd fashioned from materials in the jail. They had somehow arranged for someone to pick them up outside if they could get out. They had a plan, a timeline, everything mapped out. But jail staff discovered the plot before they could execute it. Wade was charged with attempted escape and conspiracy. He was moved to a more secure section of the jail and placed under stricter supervision. In 2023, while still awaiting his murder trial, Wade was implicated in a drug smuggling operation inside the jail. Investigators discovered that Wade was part of a scheme to bring methamphetamine and other drugs into the facility. He was charged with attempted trafficking of methamphetamine between 28 and 200 grams and conspiracy to traffic drugs. Wade eventually pleaded no contest to these charges. He received an additional 12-year sentence to run concurrently with whatever he would receive for the murders. But those drug charges, that escape attempt, they were nothing compared to what he was facing for Kristine Melton and Diane Ruiz. Finally, in June 2024, nearly 5 years after the killings, Wade Wilson went on trial for 2 counts of first-degree murder. The trial was held in Lee County Circuit Court before Judge Nicholas Thompson. The prosecution was led by experienced prosecutors who had spent years building their case. Wade's defense team was led by public defenders who faced an almost impossible task, defending a man who had confessed, who had overwhelming physical evidence against him, and who had spent the years since his arrest making himself look as unsympathetic as possible. The trial was televised. Court TV broadcast the proceedings live. Local news covered it extensively. And that's when something unexpected, something disturbing, something unprecedented happened. People started watching, not just locally in Southwest Florida, but nationally. Clips from the trial went viral on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Videos of Wade sitting in court, videos of him smirking, videos of him whispering to his lawyers. They racked up millions of views. And instead of being horrified by Wade Wilson's crimes, instead of sympathizing with the victims, thousands of people became obsessed with Wade Wilson himself. The trial lasted several weeks. Prosecutors presented their case methodically, piece by piece, building an ironclad argument for Wade's guilt. On the first day, they showed surveillance footage from Buddha Live Bar showing Wade with Kristine Melton and Stephanie Sailors. They presented testimony from Stephanie, who described the night, the hours at Jason Shepard's house, going to Kristine's apartment, and leaving Wade and Kristine alone together. Stephanie broke down crying on the stand. She said she would never forgive herself for leaving Kristine alone with him. Prosecutors presented phone records showing that Wade had used Kristine's phone after her death, making calls, sending texts, trying to access her bank accounts. They showed surveillance footage from the Whataburger, where Wade ate breakfast, covered in scratches. They showed footage from an H-E-B grocery store, where Wade went later that morning, still driving Kristine's car, acting like nothing had happened. The medical examiner who performed Kristine Melton's autopsy testified. She described the injuries to Kristine's neck, the bruising, the petechiae in her eyes, all consistent with strangulation. She said Kristine had been strangled from behind, that death would have taken several minutes, and that Kristine may have been conscious for some of that time. The courtroom was silent as the medical examiner spoke. Kristine's family sat in the front row, tears streaming down their faces. Then came testimony about Diane Ruiz. Investigators who found her body testified about the condition it was in, the massive trauma, the tire marks. The medical examiner who performed Diane's autopsy was visibly shaken, testifying about the extent of the injuries. She said Diane had been strangled first, then run over multiple times. She said the damage to Diane's body was some of the worst she'd ever seen in her career. Diane's family couldn't bear to stay in the courtroom for this testimony. Several left. Those who remained sobbed openly. But the most dramatic moment of the trial came when Stephen Testiseca, Wade's biological father, took the stand. The courtroom was packed. Everyone wanted to hear what Wade had said in those phone calls. Stephen was nervous, emotional, clearly conflicted about testifying against his own son, but he told the truth. He recounted the phone calls in detail. He said Wade had called him multiple times on the morning of October 7th. He said Wade had confessed to strangling Kristine Melton while she slept. He said Wade described picking up Diane Ruiz and strangling her in the car. And then Stephen said something that made the entire courtroom gasp. He said Wade had told him, "I pushed her out of the car and ran over her. I backed up and ran over her again and again. She didn't look human when I was done." Stephen Testiseca looked at the jury and said, "My son told me these things like he was proud, like he wanted me to know what he'd done." He sounded excited. Wade sat at the defense table, expressionless, while his father testified. He showed no emotion, no remorse, nothing. The prosecution asked Stephen, "Did your son say why he killed these women?" Stephen said, "No, he never gave me a reason. It was like he just wanted to." The defense tried to discredit Stephen, suggesting he was lying, that he had an agenda, that he was trying to get attention. But Stephen held firm. He said, "I wish this wasn't true. I wish my son hadn't done these things, but he did, and those families deserve justice." After Stephen's testimony, the prosecution presented forensic evidence. DNA specialists testified that Wade's DNA was found in Kristine's home. Diane's DNA was found under her own fingernails, mixed with skin cells that matched Wade. The scratches on Wade's face, neck, and arms when he was arrested were consistent with defensive wounds from Diane's fight for her life. The defense tried to argue that Wade suffered from brain damage caused by years of drug abuse, that he had cognitive impairments that made him prone to impulsive behavior, that he couldn't control himself. They brought in a neurologist, Dr. Mark Rubino, who testified that brain scans of Wade showed abnormalities. He said Wade had frontal lobe damage that could affect decision-making and impulse control. He said Wade's drug use had essentially broken his brain, but the prosecution brought in their own medical expert, Dr. Thomas Coyne, who reviewed the same brain scans and disagreed entirely. He said Wade's brain showed no structural defects, no asymmetry, no significant damage. He said Wade knew exactly what he was doing when he killed Kristine Melton and Diane Ruiz. He said this wasn't impulsive behavior. This was calculated, deliberate murder. The defense called no other witnesses. Wade did not testify. His lawyers advised him not to, knowing the prosecution would destroy him on cross-examination. So Wade sat silently throughout the trial, occasionally whispering to his lawyers, occasionally smirking at something said in court, but never speaking publicly. On June 12, 2024, after weeks of testimony, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for about 2 hours. Then they returned with their verdict. Guilty. Guilty on all counts. 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder. Grand theft auto, burglary, battery, everything. Wade Wilson showed no reaction as the verdicts were read. He sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead, as if he didn't care. But the trial wasn't over. In Florida, when someone is convicted of first-degree murder, there's a penalty phase where the jury recommends either life in prison without parole or the death penalty. The jury doesn't have to be unanimous. They just need a majority. In Wade's case, the penalty phase lasted several more days. Prosecutors argued that Wade deserved death. They said his crimes were heinous, atrocious, and cruel. They said he had murdered 2 innocent women for no reason. They said he had shown absolutely no remorse. They presented aggravating factors. Wade was on probation at the time of the murders for previous crimes. He committed 2 murders within hours of each other. The murders were especially heinous and cruel. The second murder, Diane Ruiz's murder, was cold, calculated, and premeditated. The defense tried to save Wade's life. They brought back Dr. Rubino to testify again about the brain damage. They presented evidence of Wade's troubled childhood, his drug addiction, the fact that he'd been given up for adoption as a baby. Wade's adoptive parents, Steve and Candace Wilson, wrote a letter to the court begging for mercy. Wade's lawyer read it aloud. The letter said, "We know our son has done terrible things. We know he has caused unimaginable pain. But we also know the system failed him. We tried everything we could, but he needed help we couldn't provide. Please don't take his life. The hopes and dreams of his life are already lost, but the human is still in there somewhere." But the jury had heard enough. On June 25, 2024, they voted on the penalty. For the murder of Kristine Melton, they voted 9-3 in favor of death. For the murder of Diane Ruiz, they voted 10-2 in favor of death. The jury recommended that Wade Wilson be sentenced to death for both murders. The final decision rested with Judge Nicholas Thompson. Florida law allows judges to override a jury's recommendation, but it rarely happens. Judge Thompson scheduled a sentencing hearing for August 27, 2024. During that hearing, Kristine's family and Diane's family gave victim impact statements. Samantha Katimer, Kristine's cousin, spoke about losing her best friend, her child's godmother, someone she loved like a sister. She looked directly at Wade and said, "You took her from us for no reason. She trusted you. She welcomed you into her home, and you killed her while she slept. There are no words for what you've done." Diane Ruiz's son, a young man in his 20s, spoke about losing his mother. He said, "My mom was turning her life around. She was sober. She was happy. She was going to get married. You took that from her. You took her from me. And for what? Because you felt like it? You're a monster." He broke down crying and couldn't finish. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of people sobbing. Wade was given a chance to speak. His lawyers asked him if he wanted to say anything. Wade looked at the judge and said, "No, I'm good." That was it. No apology, no explanation, no remorse, just, "I'm good." Judge Nicholas Thompson delivered his ruling. He said, "Wade Wilson, you have been convicted by a jury of your peers of 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder. The evidence shows both murders were heinous, atrocious, and cruel. The second murder was cold, calculated, and premeditated. You strangled Kristine Melton while she slept in her own home. You strangled Diane Ruiz and then ran over her body repeatedly. You showed no mercy to these women. You have shown no remorse for your actions. Therefore, I hereby sentence you to death for the murder of Kristine Melton and death for the murder of Diane Ruiz. May God have mercy on your soul." Wade Wilson was sentenced to death, twice. He would be sent to Florida's death row to await execution. But even before the sentencing, something disturbing had been happening outside the courtroom. During the trial, Wade Wilson's mugshot and courtroom photos went viral on social media. It started on TikTok. Someone posted a video of Wade in court with the caption, "Why is the Deadpool Killer kinda hot though?" The video got millions of views, then more videos, then more. People started commenting on Wade's appearance. They called him attractive. They said he had nice eyes. They said his tattoos were sexy. They romanticized him. Women started sending letters to Wade in jail. At first it was a few, then dozens, then hundreds. then thousands. By the time of his sentencing, Wade Wilson had received over 4,000 letters from women around the world. Some were from people opposed to the death penalty who thought his sentence was too harsh, but most were from women who claimed to love him. They sent him money for his commissary account. They sent him explicit photos. They sent him marriage proposals. They declared their devotion. They called him misunderstood, broken, someone who needed love, not punishment. The phenomenon became so widespread that the media gave these women a name, Wade's Wives. And Wade's wives were everywhere. On TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. They created fan pages. They started fundraisers for his legal defense. They made tribute videos set to romantic music. They wrote fan fiction about him. They defended him against anyone who dared call him a monster. They said things like, he deserves a second chance, and everyone makes mistakes, and you don't know what he's been through. One woman, Alexis Williams, became Wade's most devoted follower. She started communicating with him by phone from jail. They talked regularly, sometimes for hours. Alexis sent Wade money. She sent him photos. She told people she was going to marry him. She defended him online against critics. She said Wade was misunderstood, that the system had failed him, that he didn't deserve to die. But then, during the penalty phase of the trial, Alexis heard the testimony of Diane Ruiz's son. She heard the pain in his voice as he described losing his mother. She heard him describe what it was like to identify his mother's body, so badly damaged he could barely recognize her. And something clicked for Alexis. She realized what she'd been doing. She realized Wade wasn't some misunderstood bad boy. He was a murderer. He had destroyed families. He had shown no remorse, and she wanted nothing to do with him anymore. Alexis Williams later gave interviews about her experience. She said, I got caught up in the fantasy. I saw his photos and I thought he was attractive. I started talking to him and he was charming. He knew how to make me feel special. But then I heard what he actually did to those women. I heard their families, and I realized I was glorifying a monster. I'm ashamed of myself. But for every woman like Alexis who came to her senses, there were dozens more who continued to idolize Wade Wilson. The prosecutor in the case, State Attorney Amira Fox, addressed the phenomenon directly during Wade's sentencing. She said, "It has not gone unnoticed that this defendant is being idolized by some people who are somehow proud to mix their names with his through public comments, fundraising for him, or holding him up to be some sort of positive representation of a man. He is nothing more than a vicious killer and about the most poor representation of a man that the world has to offer." She said the phones at her office rang constantly with people calling to support Wade, to express sympathy for him, to ask how they could help. Meanwhile, Kristine Melton's family and Diane Ruiz's family watched in horror as the man who murdered their loved ones was treated like a celebrity. On September 17, 2025, Wade Wilson was transported from Lee County Jail to Union Correctional Institution in Rayford, Florida. He is currently on Florida's death row awaiting execution. His new mugshot, taken at Union Correctional Institution, shows him with even more tattoos, a shaved head, and a blank expression. Florida uses lethal injection for executions. Wade Wilson will spend years, possibly decades, on death row while his case goes through the mandatory appeals process. Death penalty cases in Florida average 15 to 20 years from sentencing to execution. Wade is 30 years old now. He could be on death row until he's in his 50s before his appeals are exhausted and an execution date is set. While he waits, Wade sits in a cell 23 hours a day. He's allowed 1 hour of recreation in a small outdoor cage. He gets 3 meals delivered to his cell. He can have visitors, but only behind glass. He can make phone calls, but they're monitored and recorded. He can receive mail, though it's screened. And according to reports, he still receives hundreds of letters from Wade's wives who continue to write to him, send him money, profess their love. In 2024, while in prison, Wade gave his first and only interview. He spoke to RTL, a German media outlet, via written correspondence. In the interview, Wade refused to discuss the Madeleine McCann case. Wait, that's wrong. Let me correct that. Wade refused to discuss the murders at all. He would only talk about his life in prison. He said he spends most of his time in voluntary isolation because other inmates have attacked him. He said his ribs were broken in one attack. He said he speaks fewer than 10 words a day to anyone. He said he's lost his facial expressions from spending so much time alone. And he said if he's ever released, which is impossible given his death sentences, he plans to flee to a country without extradition and enjoy a nice steak and a beer. The Wade Wilson case raises disturbing questions about our society that we cannot ignore. How did we get to a place where a murderer's mugshot can go viral and turn him into a sex symbol? How did thousands of people, mostly women, become so disconnected from reality that they fell in love with a man who strangled a woman in her sleep and ran over another woman's body 20 times? How do we explain Wade's wives? Experts who study criminal behavior and social media culture say this phenomenon isn't entirely new. There have always been people, usually women, who become romantically or sexually attracted to violent criminals. It's called hybristophilia. Ted Bundy received hundreds of love letters in prison. Women showed up to his trial dressed to impress him. He married one of his fans. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, had women showing up to his court appearances, wearing all black, trying to catch his attention. One woman married him while he was on death row. Charles Manson had followers who idolized him, who defended him, who believed he was a prophet. Serial killers, mass murderers, violent criminals, they've always had fans. But social media has amplified this to a level never seen before. With platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, a killer's image can reach millions of people in seconds. Clips from trials become entertainment. Mugshots become memes. Court proceedings become reality TV. And somewhere along the way, we forget that these are real crimes with real victims, real families destroyed, real lives ended. The Wade Wilson case is the perfect example. His face, his tattoos, his courtroom demeanor, it all went viral. But lost in all of that were Kristine Melton and Diane Ruiz. Lost in the TikTok videos and fan pages were two human beings whose lives were brutally stolen from them. Kristine Melton was not just a name in a case file. She was a 35-year-old woman who loved Halloween, who was a godmother, who had friends and family who adored her. She was planning a trip home to Illinois. She was living her life, working hard, enjoying her independence. And Wade Wilson took all of that from her. He murdered her in her sleep, in her own home, a place where she should have been safe. Diane Ruiz was not just a victim. She was a 43-year-old mother who was engaged to be married. She had overcome addiction. She was working multiple jobs to support her family. She was building a better life. And Wade Wilson took all of that from her. He strangled her, pushed her out of a car, and ran over her body until, in his own words, she didn't look human anymore. These women had futures. They had dreams. They had people who loved them. And while the internet obsessed over Wade Wilson's tattoos and courtroom smirk, their families were left to grieve in private, watching the man who destroyed their lives being treated like a celebrity, like someone worthy of admiration, like someone deserving of love and sympathy. It's obscene. It's heartbreaking. And it says something deeply troubling about our culture. The Wade Wilson case is a cautionary tale. It's a reminder that true crime isn't entertainment. It's real life. It's real pain. It's real loss. And we, as consumers of true crime content, have a responsibility to remember that. We have a responsibility to honor the victims, to respect the families, and to never, ever glorify the killers. Wade Wilson is not a hero. He's not misunderstood. He's not attractive or charming or worthy of admiration. He is a murderer, a remorseless, violent, sadistic murderer. And that's all he should ever be remembered as. If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, please reach out for help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. You are not alone. There are people who want to help you. There are resources available. You don't have to stay. You don't have to suffer. Please reach out. And if you're watching this video and you've ever romanticized a killer, if you've ever sent fan mail to someone in prison for murder, if you've ever defended a violent criminal because you found them attractive, please take a moment to think about the victims. Think about Kristine Melton, asleep in her bed, murdered by someone she thought was a friend. Think about Diane Ruiz, walking to work, trying to build a better life, brutally killed on the side of the road. They deserve to be remembered. They deserve justice, and Wade Wilson deserves to be forgotten. On January 20th, 2026, just yesterday, a new documentary about Wade Wilson premiered on Paramount+. It's called Handsome Devil, the Charming Killer. The documentary examines the case in detail, features interviews with people involved, including one of Wade's wives, Alexis Williams. It explores the social media phenomenon, the psychology behind it, and the impact on the victims' families. The documentary doesn't glorify Wade. It does the opposite. It shows him for exactly what he is, a brutal killer who manipulated people even from behind bars. This has been Forensic Disconnect. If you want to see more in-depth investigations into real cases, cases where we honor victims and never glorify killers, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, but please keep it respectful. Remember Kristine Melton. Remember Diane Ruiz. Remember that these were real people with real lives, not just characters in a viral story. I'll see you in the next one.
Copy, I'm 1012. I'll explain to you when my partner gets here, okay? Yeah. About this morning. Say again?
Can I call my girlfriend on your phone, please? Or can you call her for me?
Yeah, I can do that, but I'm just waiting for my partner to get here. Yeah, absolutely. And here's what's going to happen. Is the car running? Shut the car off for me. It's off? I'm going to detain you until I figure out what exactly is going on.
I'm just strangling my girlfriend, sir. I told you. I don't want to be harassed or anything.
Wait, you don't want any trouble from me because you're on probation, okay? Okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I'm going to have you step out of the car, and I'm going to detain you. Not arrest. Detain you right now, okay? And I can't have any problems. You understand me? All right. What's that? Bike 5, I'm at Joe's Crab Shack in the parking lot. I will. I give you my word. No. I have to detain you. By our procedures, I have to detain you. Because of the battery this morning. There wasn't any battery? Okay. I will. No. Just relax. Let me see the keys to the car. Let me see the keys to the car. Keys. Keys. Wait, we're not going to have any problems. Just give me the keys to the car. Wade.
Sir, I didn't do anything. Look at me.
Okay. All right. Please. Just wait till my partner gets here. L41. Gonna need a couple more units. Don't go anywhere. Hey.
Alpha 8 being around with an area.
Don't do it. He's in his car. He's attempting to take off.